Good morning, English 11B. Mr. Johnson here once again. Today I'm going to talk about the final step in your research process. Of course, we're not writing the full paper, right? So this, I think, is a very manageable final step in this process, and I think as long as you followed along with all the previous lessons, you're not going to really have any trouble with this step, and it's going to be pretty self-explanatory. But I'm going to go over the organizer today so you know exactly what you're doing, because it is worth a lot in terms of your grade. So let's talk about this. First of all, just a quick reminder. Let's just remind ourselves of the word thesis, right? And you should be familiar with this word, of course, because we talked a lot about it in the first, in English 11A, when we were talking about, the ACT essays. Of course, we don't have to write an ACT essay this year, but you still have to know what a thesis is, because you'll be using them all your life. So a thesis is a one-sentence claim that ends your introduction, and it should tell your reader what your essay will be about. So it's the last sentence, usually, it can be anywhere, but it's usually the last sentence in your introduction, and it tells you what your essay is going to be about. So I provided an example here. In the 1930s, migrant workers dreamt of financial stability and workers' rights in California. It follows a very simple formula, and I just want you to follow the same exact formula, and it goes like this: decade plus marginalized group plus the American dream. So when you are thinking about your essay, what you really need to think about is, okay, which decade have I chosen, which you should already know, which marginalized group, which obviously you also already know because you've been doing your research on those two things throughout. And then it gets a little trickier because then you have to define their version, that marginalized group's version of the American dream. And the American dream is obviously pretty amorphous. It's a pretty big topic. So that's where you have to get a little bit more thoughtful, I would say. But it's pretty much plug and play from there. Once you have those three elements together in one sentence, you know you have a solid thesis. Okay, moving on. Evidence organization is the next step in this process. And because of the revised calendar and the virtual learning that's happening this trimester, normally, of course, you would have to write the entire paper. That's not happening. You don't have to write the entire paper. All we are asking you to do is to organize your quotes and cite them properly, because that really is kind of a foundational skill to the research process, and it's something that you will need going into future into the workforce and into college and so forth. So being able to do research and being able to cite your sources is really the key there. That's what matters. And that's why we are focusing so much on this essential skill. And that's also why it's worth so much of your grade for this class, because if you don't get this, then you're really going to have trouble, sort of understanding how to do research later in life and that sort of thing. So basically, this organizer is designed to show me, as your teacher, or Miss Arklin, as it were, that your research was guided by essential questions. You're going to understand how to organize research by topic and claim, which is huge. And you are going to be used to doing research and pulling from a variety of different sources. And you're also going to understand how to create APA citations, which is also a valuable skill. I just want to remind you, if you didn't see my video on Tuesday, take a look at that again just to refresh your memory, because you do have to get this right. But there's a little helpful reminder right here as well. When we're talking about in-text citations, which I'll show you in a second in the organizer, but there's a couple different acceptable formats depending upon, of course, how much information you have. So if you have the author, great, you can use the normal format. It's going to be Smith 2019, right? That's the, let's say the author's name is Smith, the year of publication would be 2019, okay? If you have the author but you don't have a date, then you go Smith, comma, ND, like that, just like you see it right here. If you don't know the author, then you're going to use the title of the piece. So you're going to say something like "The Dream" in quotation marks with a little comma right there, and then you're going to have the year of publication. In this case, our example is 2019. If you don't have the author or the date, then you're just going to give the title, and you're going to put a comma, just as you see right here, and then you're going to say no date. So that's just a helpful reminder, because you do have to get the formatting right. Otherwise, you will lose points on this assignment. Okay, so when you are organizing, you have to think of just kind of that old school template we all have in our heads. It's kind of a classic, kind of a 4 or 5 paragraph essay. But what you really need to realize is that you're going to have your introduction, then you're going to have these sections, okay? And it's really important that you pay attention to that essay section, because that is how you are going to choose which quotes go where. And this is also going to tell you whether or not you've done enough research to really fully answer the question, or if you were to write this paper, actually go out and write the paper, which you're not, don't worry. But you do have to pay attention to that. So you're going to start with introduction and background information, and you only need one quote in that spot, okay? But every paragraph from there on out requires 2 quotes. So for historical context of the time period, you have to answer the question, what was happening during this decade? And you have to have 1 to 2 major historical events with 2 quotes to back you up, okay? Same goes for overview of marginalized groups in context. Answer those questions, okay? And you have to answer those questions fully using what evidence you have gathered, and so on, all the way down, right? It's also going to be helpful for you to, and then the other thing you have to recognize is that there is a space for references at the bottom. So you also have to put that bibliography you created on Monday in there as well, okay? And I'll show you what that looks like. So here's the teacher example just below that on the next page. You can see kind of how we would set this up. So again, you're going to have an introduction, you're going to have background information, you're going to throw in your first quote that is related to that this is just background information, right? And then you are actually going to create an in-text citation. Now, normally you would do this within the context of a paper, right? And you would have to kind of work those sentences in there. But in this case, all you have to do is provide the quote in this box, okay, in this column right here, and then you have to provide the citation for that quote, or for those quotes, depending on how many you have in the section, right there as best you are able. Following, of course, this method, APA in-text citation examples. Okay, so that is the sort of the teacher example, and you can see that when we're thinking about what to put in here, we're always choosing quotations, we're choosing textual evidence that actually responds to and has information that we would use to answer the questions in the box to the left of it as you're facing it. So make sure that you are thinking very intentionally about which quotes you're putting where, because that is also something that we're going to look at as we are grading these things. How well are you able to organize your evidence, right? It's called an evidence organizer, so that is the name of the game. You can't just put your quotes in willy-nilly and call it a day, no matter how good your citation is. It doesn't matter. It has to make sense, okay, in terms of, if you were writing this paper, could you actually write a convincing paper using that evidence, or would it just kind of sound kind of random? Okay, and then of course at the bottom you're going to have your references page, which is going to be a copy and paste move for you because you've already done it, right? So if you followed all the steps up to this point, I promise you it's going to be easy. It's going to be a piece of cake. But this is how you are going to submit your paper. So you will literally copy and paste this organizer into a new document, your own document, okay? And then you are going to use that organizer to organize your quotes with their proper APA citations and with your references at the bottom in proper APA format. And then you're done. And that is the task. So, yeah, and it's worth 25% of your grade. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you for watching.